Welcome to Finding Family DNA, the show about finding and connecting birth families with LA Morning News anchor Chris Schabel and Jay Rosenzweig, founder and CEO of BirthParentFinder.com.
Welcome to a special episode of Finding Family DNA. I'm Jay Rosenzweig, the founder and CEO of BirthParentFinder.com, and I am at a conference in Palm Springs for the California Association of Licensed Investigators, and I have a booth this year for Birth Parent Finder, and like I said, this is a special episode because we ended our season 1 last month with 20 episodes with Chris Schabel. Chris obviously is not here because our season 1 ended, and we're probably going to pick it up in January or next year with a totally different format. And at this conference, I'm going to have, like I said, I have a booth. I'm looking right at it for Birth Parent Finder, and I'm very fortunate to have with me Misty Gillis, who you all know Misty. Misty is our top genealogist at Birth Parent Finder, and she's going to be doing a presentation tomorrow on genealogy for this conference. So Misty, what are you going to be talking about?
I'll be talking about how people can utilize traditional genealogy and genetic genealogy to help resolve their cases and investigations.
That's it?
Well, I'm going to close with my big finale is going to be a lot about the story of baby Holly. We had talked about that before.
Right.
We had Holly on the show. So I'm going to talk a lot about the genealogy investigation that was done with that, and then a lot of the investigation that the law enforcement agency did, because I know you PIs do the same type of investigation. So
Right.
tie it all together.
And most PIs don't know anything about genealogy.
That's right.
I talked about this before, that they don't know how to use the Ancestry database,
Right.
and this will be a treat for them.
I hope so. I hope they enjoy it.
Yeah, and you've never been to California before?
I've been once to Los Angeles, never to Palm Springs.
Okay, you flew directly in here from Chicago, so
That's
that
right.
was kind of cool. And everyone, she literally got off the plane 2 hours ago, so and thank you for being here. We only see each other like once a year.
Exactly.
And like I said, tomorrow you're speaking. I'm moderating a session on growing your PI business.
Okay.
So I have 2 PIs talking about their business, and I'm moderating that session.
That'd be great.
And that's later tomorrow. But this is great. We may bring in some guests later on if they come by the booth. There's some PIs that could talk about their business. But let's talk about what we've been doing lately.
Yes.
And we talked about this earlier, what cases we want to talk about. Let's talk about Beth.
Okay.
And these are all recent
Right.
cases that we solved, and they're unique. So what was unique about Beth's case?
So with Beth's case, she wanted to identify her biological mother was her most important thing that she wanted to identify, the most important person. And I believe we kind of tag teamed the research on that, and you did the outreach and getting in touch with the family. And Beth was in a really good place in her life. She was really comfortable with the idea of, utilizing our services to be able to reunite with her family. And we successfully were able to get her in touch with her biological mother and her biological siblings. And you actually found out a pretty interesting tidbit about a birthday cake, if you want to share that with everybody.
Yeah, this is interesting because Beth's birth mother never forgot about her. And her family, she was very transparent with her family. And she always wanted to know that she had a child before her other kids were born. And Beth would celebrate Beth's birthday every single year. And they let it up to Beth whether Beth wanted to reach out to them or not. And that's unusual, isn't it?
It is, especially, that's actually the second case in the last couple of weeks that's happened. But that idea of, she said they would bake cookies together, like her and her other biological children, and birthday cakes, and all in celebration of Beth. And that was very interesting.
So what's the real interesting part is she hasn't met them yet. It's overwhelming for her because it's a huge family. Her biological sister has 10 kids.
Wow.
And they all knew about Beth, and they want to meet her, but it's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming, yeah.
So we confirmed the birth father. How did you do that? Because I couldn't do it.
Through DNA, we were able to take a look at the matches. Once you were able to identify this is who the biological mother was, it made my job easier because I could say, okay, so we can cut off these half of the matches and just focus on this side of, the DNA results and work through that to really figure out who her father could be.
Right. So it was 1 of 2 brothers.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember because we have a lot of cases. And so it was 1 of 2 brothers and Tom.
Yeah.
Let's say Tom. I'm not going to give last names. Tom. Okay. I reached out to Tom's sister, and Tom's sister didn't believe it.
That's right.
Because there's no way. There's no way possible, blah, blah, blah. And you probably got the DNA wrong.
Yep.
So we asked the birth mother, if she would tell us who the birth father is, and she confirmed it was that guy.
That's right.
So and I said, praise Misty, because she got it
Well,
right.
if you remember, Beth was told that, I'm not going to get into too specifics identifying, but she was told that her birth father was a specific ethnicity. Do you remember that? And and so we thought, okay, when we got the results back, we said this ethnicity is not showing up at all. But it turns out Tom's roommate was that ethnicity.
Right, but it's not the birth father.
There must have been.
Was this the case where she put the wrong information in the wrong name just because she didn't want to identify the guy in the index?
In the index, yes.
It's thank God for DNA though.
Exactly.
So
DNA.
here's the weird part, and I won't get into too many specifics again. According to the birth mother, she told the birth father, but he didn't want any part of it. Basically, I'll leave it at that. And when I got a hold of the birth father's sister, she talked to him, and then he called me, and I told him what the birth mother said, and he goes, I never knew this woman was pregnant. I never knew. And if he doesn't have any daughters. Yeah, and he goes, if I knew there was a daughter out there, I would want to be part of her life. So they've spoken. They haven't met yet.
Right.
They both live in California. She lives central. He lives southern.
Okay.
But it's not that far, a few hours away. They're going to meet eventually.
That's
but she has medical issues.
Yeah.
She was able to get medical history from both sides.
And that's one of the most important facets of this kind of investigation.
So tell everyone out there, if you don't know who your birth family is and you don't have medical history, take a DNA test.
Yep.
It's and take it with Ancestry, because that's most people. 60 million people have taken Ancestry test. It keeps going up every year.
Exactly.
So that's one example of going into a case and you can't rely on the non-identifying information.
Right. That's exactly right. You can't really rely on much than the DNA at the end of the day, as a 100% truth. And that, if you want to talk about Carolyn's case, we had the same kind of hang up with that case as well, because in that case, she had come to us, she had taken the DNA test, and she was looking for a biological father. Her biological mother was still alive, she had raised her, and she was told this specific name. We'll say it was Bob Jones. And I'm looking through the DNA, and I'm like, there's no Jones here. And so I had narrowed it down to 3 brothers, and there was brother A, B, and C. And I called brother A, and he said, yes, all 3 of us were in the Los Angeles area during that time frame. But it wasn't me, I don't think, but give my brothers a call. And I called brother B, and brother B said, well, it could be me, but I'm not 100% sure. And I do remember what was interesting is, neither of these guys had the last name Jones or the first name Bob, for that matter. But when we had talked to brother B, the mother had said, I specifically remember at this time in my life, I had gone to an Ike and Turner concert. Do you remember
that? Yeah, we went over that. Because we're going back and forth, you and I.
Right.
You were talking to the guy, and I was talking to the client.
Yep. And I said, okay, and so I had messaged the, brother B, and said about the Ike and Turner concert, and he said, was it at such and such club during this year? And she said, that was it. And
was it the 70s?
Yeah, it was the 70s. And I can't remember the name of the club, but it was really interesting because...
It was in SoCal.
Yeah. And even then, he was a little bit hesitant. And that case took an interesting turn because he had a childhood best friend that had grown up with him that viewed him as a brother. And he stepped in to kind of intermediary between the brother and the client and us, just to keep everybody safe and their spirits protected and things like that. And of course, it ended up that brother B was the father. It was the Ike and Turner concert that did the trick. But DNA, that's why it's so important, is because, you can be given a name, you can be given a lot of information, and memories fade.
And how long did we have that case for?
Just a couple days.
Caroline's case for a couple of days? Why did it seem like it was longer?
Because it took so long, we had to wait for the, remember he did the
he took a DNA test.
It
wasn't. He took a special paternity test, sent her a test.
It took about 2 weeks to get the kit to her for the testing, to get the kit back, to get the
and that's cooperation.
Oh, yeah, that was great, yeah.
Yeah, because who does that? I mean, not many people. And this guy wanted to know. I mean,
as far as I know, him and the client have been in touch, and everything's been smooth sailing. And he was very, if this is my daughter, I want to know, so I'm willing to help in this process. And yeah,
it's a great result. Have they met yet?
I'm not sure if they've met yet. Actually, I got to follow up with them.
Near each other? Or?
I can't recall, actually. I want to say that
I don't think they live in the same state.
The father moved out of state. He was, close to her, obviously, when she was conceived. He lived in the same state, but I don't think he
But really, it's about cooperation.
Yes.
people keep walking by our booth here and admiring what we're doing because we're at this conference. People are setting up their booth, and there's Brian out there. Just took our picture. Another private. You can't see Brian. And there's Cynthia from NCISS, which is another private investigator association. They're a national association. And I here and say a few words. You're more than welcome to.
Come on.
In the spot. We're not live, so she's putting all her stuff away. She's sitting, her booth is next to mine. And Cynthia and I, we've known each other for years. And you can come back here. And does she need a mic or no? Okay, you can come between us. Yeah. Just don't come between us. No. Go ahead. We don't want you knocking anything over.
I don't want to get your feet caught.
This is Cynthia Cavalli, and she is a private investigator in Orange County, California, and you're on the board of directors for National Council of Investigation and Security Services. Is that correct?
Oh, wow.
You said that in one breath, right?
Yes, did.
So you just look at that camera right there and just tell people what exactly NCISS does and what do you do?
So I'm Cynthia Cavalli, private investigator in California, licensed in California and Nevada, and I'm on the board of the directors for the National Council of Security Investigative Services. And what that is a national organization, which is kind of the watchdog for keeping all investigators' privacy rights intact. We lobby and we go to Washington every year and talk to our representatives and make sure that we are able to retain all the DMV protections, database protections, records, court records access, so that we can perform our jobs effectively and let the representatives understand what we do as investigators as a profession.
Right, and that's important for my business because if everything got closed off, it would limit the amount of information I can get with the work that I do.
Right.
And especially the work that you do.
Right.
There's a lot of law enforcement work too. Yeah. So, but anyway, I'm looking forward to this conference. It's we had it here 2 years ago, but that was after COVID. It's the first time we had an in-person conference in 3 years, and it's in the past now. But everyone's showing up now for these conferences, and it's all good.
That's great.
But we'll see you around the conference. Thanks for stopping by.
It's always a pleasure, and I love to see your stories and getting people back together on Instagram and on TV. So.
And this is a special segment of our podcast that, like I said, we're taking a break, but we just want to do this because we have Misty here. And I get to see her only once a year, so.
Thank you so much.
But thanks, I got it right.
You got it.
Yeah, take care.
Take care.
Be careful out there. Yeah, you were talking about Caroline, which was a great story, and then there's Leah.
Oh, yes.
Pronounced right, Leah?
It is Leah, yes.
What was Leah's story?
So Leah was interesting. She was adopted, and she was adopted in Arkansas. And so she was able to obtain her original birth certificate, but her original birth certificate only had her mother's name and her mother's age on it. Did not have her father's name on it. She had tried personally herself for many years to track down her biological mother, but the problem is her biological mother was 17 when she had her, and her mom was born in 1958, so after the 1950 census. So we couldn't find any record of her really online. But,
right, the 1960 census will be.
It's not out
It's
yet.
coming out in a couple of years, correct?
Right, exactly. And so, the idea too was that if she had her at 17 and put her name down on the birth certificate, she likely has gotten married in this amount of time since the 70s, and so her name has changed. So she came to us and said, I have all this information. I have my non-ID, I have my original birth certificate, I have my DNA results, and I just don't know what to do. And I've reached this point in my life where I want to find out. And so what I did was I started actually looking at newspaper records. And so I found the very small town in Arkansas that she was born in.
I'm going to stop you. Because a lot of genealogists just go strictly off trees and names. They don't look at those records that you said.
Right.
And continue, because that was a big help. Huh?
So I went through and I found, I used, her first, middle, and last name. They were somewhat unique. And I put that combination into newspapers.com and I narrowed it down to Arkansas. And I started seeing mentions, and the mentions of her, like during school events and things like that, the age tied to it matched up with the age that this person would be. And so I was able to track her movements through these newspaper records, including to her wedding announcement when she got married 4 years later. And then I was able to use public records to find where she currently lives now, which is funny because it's the same small little town. She just has a different last name. And it was, even if you go through the public records, it doesn't list her maiden name. But I knew, with her first name, the age, the location, I could use some logic to put those pieces together. And so I had told the client, I had sent her pictures, and it looked exactly like the client's daughters. And she finally said, okay, can you call her? And I called her, and I left her a voicemail, a very vague one, just kind of saying I was interested in family history.
You can't lay details saying, hey, I have a client who was adopted looking for their parents.
Right. Well, what was funny was I leave her this voicemail, and I follow up with a text saying, hey, I left you a voicemail regarding XYZ. Could you give me a call back? She doesn't respond for a couple of hours, and it gets late into the night, and the client says, you know what, could you just tell her it's me? And so I sent her a text message explaining my client was born XYZ in this place, yada, yada, yada. She's very appreciative for the choice that you made. She would love to speak to you. So my phone rings about 20 minutes later, and it's the mom. But the interesting thing is, she goes, I got your voicemail. I said, did you get my text message? She goes, no. And I said, oh. She goes, you're doing genealogy on my family tree, like on my last name. What can I help with? And I said, well, what you can help with. And I explained the situation, and she was quiet for a second. And she goes, yeah, that's my daughter. And she goes, and you know what? She goes, my daughter and my other daughter, my daughter I had after her knows about her. We talk about her in the house. We've always had this conversation about, will she come and look for us and will she find us? So it was very similar to.
We love those.
That's
so important
yeah.
to be transparent and not keep this a secret, because
Right.
with DNA, it's going to come out and then it's going to get ugly.
So they immediately, the client, she kind of, I don't want to say jumped the gun, but she got excited. She messaged the half-sister on Facebook, was received very well, and they've been all talking up a storm since then. And so, the mother was also able to provide information about the biological father. And it was interesting, too, because one of the things I think we run into a lot is what we're good at and why our services are so helpful is because there's a lot of people that carry shame and regret when it comes to adoption. And in this case, when I was talking to the biological mother, I could tell she had her guard up. And she said, I've always wondered, did she have a good life? And I said,
That's the thing they want to know.
I said, she specifically asked me to reach out to you because she wants me to tell you how much love she has for you and appreciation and thankfulness because she did have a good life. And immediately that wall dropped down. She got emotional, and we were able to make that connection and get them reunited together.
Did they meet?
I don't think they've met yet. They live very far away from each other.
Because eventually we'd love to have the reunion photos, videos, because that really helps our social media also. I'm just trying to think. We got a lot of successful cases.
Yes.
But we also have those heartbreaking ones too, where the birth mother never acknowledges, never returns our phone call, and we strategize. You and I strategize.
Yes.
What is our next step? What are we going to do?
Right.
And what we always try to do is either have a letter that we put together, and I like hand delivering it sometimes.
Yeah,
I do that every few months.
Yeah.
If it's local, I deliver it. If
Right.
it's out of the area, I have one of my colleagues deliver it. If it's another state, I get someone to deliver it, or a family member that could do it. But do you have one specifically that you recall recently? I think there is one where you had me prepare a letter, and we sent it out. We sent out a letter to 4 different birth fathers.
Yeah, so
That one, that was crazy.
that's kind of a difficult case. And so the situation with that is, I don't want to give too many identifying details, but she was conceived in Georgia, and her mother has said that it was a man that lived in the apartment complex that she was living in at the time. And so she had the exact address of the apartment that she was living at, and she said that his name was George. And
Yeah, that narrows it down.
right, exactly. And Paula George is in Georgia. So we ended up going through the DNA results, and it turns out that her father is very clearly Guatemalan. So he's from Guatemala. So I had ended up going through the public records index because the DNA matches were very far, very distant. And I found a listing for a Jorge, which could be George.
Jorge.
Yes, living at that address. And so we originally had sent a letter to him, and we didn't hear anything back. So we expanded our search to anyone that had previous addresses in that area with the similar name and last name, and kind of sent a little blast out to 4 or 5 of them. and we ended up not hearing anything back, but I do have an update on that case.
You do? Can you share with us?
Yeah, so I recently was able to, MyHeritage had a free weekend where you can upload.
I remember that,
And you
yeah.
can unlock the tools. So I had the client do that. I asked her permission. I downloaded her DNA and I uploaded it. And we had about a first cousin once removed. And I was able to triangulate some of the matches from the Guatemalan family together. And I believe I'm on the right track. So I'm hoping we can get her the answer she needs.
The letters that you sent out to these 4 guys, you believe one of them is the birth father?
I can never say 100% sure. I don't know.
Well, we know that you go by hunches.
Right.
So for the other
My
company,
hunch
the other
is pretty-
company, I won't go into details
Yeah.
about, it's none of my business, but the other company you work for, you had a hunch on a recent case.
Yes.
And your hunch paid off.
Yes.
Big time. I mean,
Yes.
big time.
Yep.
And that'll be public eventually.
Yep.
And that, sure, everyone was really proud of you on this, but we won't get into that because that's not my company.
We work on this too. Like I do hunches with Birth Parent Finder all the time. I mean, I can think of, do you remember Denise's case? Do you remember Denise?
Mendoza?
Yeah.
Shoot, she doesn't mind us mentioning her name.
No, so we were looking for her biological father, and what was interesting is she took the DNA test. So Denise Mendoza was seeking her biological father, and so she had done the ancestry DNA, and I had gone through the results, and I discovered that he was half Puerto Rican, half Caucasian, like Northern European. And so that was kind of a little bit easier because I found that edge of the different ethnicities, and I'm looking for a family that had a child that was biracial, essentially. And so I built out these family trees, and what I did was, the Puerto Rican matches were pretty distant. So I focused on the Northern European matches, and I was able to finally get a network going, and I built it out to a specific spot where I found one of the relatives in this family tree. I built out the family trees, and I found the Northern European connections, and I finally, through building down the tree, found one that married a Puerto Rican woman.
Nice.
And what was interesting was this Puerto Rican woman died very shortly after their marriage. He went on to remarry and had other kids. No obituary for her, no children, nothing. So what I had to do was look at her death certificate, find out her parents' names.
I'm going to stop you because what if she didn't have a death certificate? What
I
if she didn't have an obituary that you could look at? How do you deal with that?
If I didn't have a death certificate, I probably would have had to have ordered one directly from the state of New York. I would have had to try.
They'll send you one?
Oh, yeah.
Even though you're not part of the family?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure what I would have done there. That's an interesting hypothetical. I was lucky enough that it was there though, and I had the mom's name, and I had a hunch that Denise's father's name was Richard, and I was able to look through the census record in New York for a Richard born at the right age who was living with a grandmother named Carmen, because that was the mother's name. And lo and behold, I found it. And I was able to track down a person with the exact same name that was listed as a junior, who also grew up in New York, that was born shortly after Denise was. So I called this junior and I said, was your father's name Richard, and was your great-grandmother's name Carmen? Was your grandmother's name XYZ, and did she pass shortly after getting married to your grandfather? And he goes, yeah.
And he just voluntarily gave you that information?
Yes.
Without thinking you're a scammer trying to get family information?
Right. And so it was
It goes
funny
to their
because
bank account?
he even then went and took an ancestry test, and it showed up as a half-brother, and I was right on my hunch, and
Do you
that
think
was
the
her
way you
father.
approach people has a lot to do with being successful and getting information?
I think there is a certain finesse to it. Like there's a certain way that you have to open conversations and know how to speak to people, and I think that only happens with practice.
Where'd you learn that from?
You.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, and I
Absolutely.
tell people, in the past, I've told people on our podcast that I've learned a lot from you, Misty.
Yeah, it's mutual learning.
And
Right.
it's a team. I mean,
Right.
we have a great team.
Yes.
From top to bottom, from Linda, who the first person you contact,
Yep.
our investigative consultant, you. We have another genealogist who I don't use very often because she does work for another company.
Yep.
We only bring her in if we need her when we're like super busy.
Right.
But you've been able to handle pretty much everything.
Yeah.
You and I, we just, what do we take in? We take in over 100 cases a year.
Yeah, that's
Which is
crazy.
a lot
Think about
for
it
a
like that.
small company. Even it's a national company, but it's small enough where we can pretty much
Right.
handle everything. And we do get sometimes forgetful and returning clients calls or like letting their case go for a month, but that's nothing because usually when we're letting their case go for a month, we're waiting for something to happen.
Exactly.
But we don't
Exactly.
usually let it go too long.
Right.
but I love what we do.
Same here.
And I'm just trying to think of other things we could talk about. Like I said, this is not a planned podcast.
Right.
We had no outline for this, and we're basically going to sit here and talk about cases. I'm just trying to think. I gave you one recently. Do you remember last week? Do you have one? The one. Which one was that?
That was Leah.
Was it?
Yep.
Okay. So that was a good case.
And I just got a new one. Her name is Susan, and I'm working on that one. And what's interesting about that one is when I originally had looked at the DNA results, I thought, so she was born in Texas, and I had thought, okay, one of the parents is definitely Italian. Well, both of the parents are Italian, but both Italian parents' families are very closely from Louisiana. They were all from New Orleans. So what's interesting to me is I'm trying to solve that mystery of how we went from New Orleans to Harris County, Texas, and then back. What's the story there? So that's what I'm working on, trying to decode.
Right. We solve their case, find out who their mother is, find out who their father is. And then they want to know the backstory. And that's, I can't provide them the backstory unless they're alive.
Right.
And some people, honestly, most people do get closure, but there's always this 0.5% that wants the full story.
Right, every nitty-gritty.
Like the Harlequin romance story. We can't provide that to them.
No.
Because they're deceased.
Yep.
And if they even were alive, would they even provide that to us?
Right, exactly. And so sometimes I hate to say it, but I think a lot of people don't understand is, the story's not always going to be a Harlequin romance. There's tragedy, there's sadness, there's untoward actions that have happened between people and clients that we've worked with where it's ended up being,
So this is something I didn't tell you, a case I took in like a couple of days ago.
Okay.
I solved it immediately. It wasn't very difficult. I talked to a family member, and there were two brothers. I'm going to just paraphrase this from what I remember. I didn't know which one was the birth father.
Okay.
So it turns out the birth mother was married to the other brother, before she got pregnant from the client's birth father. How weird is that?
Yeah.
I mean, just the birth father it was the second brother, but she was married to the first brother before. But the child is from the second brother.
That's what I mean. Is it's not always a.
Where do you think this took place?
Alabama.
No. Alabama people out there, but it's like, look, you got Alabama, you got Arkansas, you got Georgia, Louisiana. Those states, there's a lot of endogamy.
Yes.
Will you explain what endogamy means to the lay people?
Endogamy is essentially when you're raised in places that you have families that marry into the same families over and over. And we're not talking incest. We're talking about, your third cousin might be married to your third cousin who's married to the same family that your second cousin's married to. So it's a lot of detangling. You see the same common ancestors repeatedly in the tree.
And those are difficult to solve, aren't they?
It inflates the shared DNA sometimes, and it causes the connections to either seem closer than they actually.
And that's where you got to get someone to tell you the story.
Right.
Yeah, I've had that happen. Georgia, Alabama.
Kentucky is very bad.
Now in California, though, rarely.
Yeah.
Rarely California. So this conference that we're segueing into California, this conference that starts tomorrow, everyone knows that I have the California Matching Birth Index, and I brought it with me with the microfiche reader.
Oh, that'd be
and
fun.
Offering the people at the conference free birth index searches.
That'd be very fun, yeah.
You have access to the Texas birth index, which is similar?
The birth books, yep.
So what's different between that one and the California one?
So we don't have the matching index like you do. So I have the original Texas birth books, and so that's actually online. It's a free resource. It's called David Gray's People Finder. And so you can access the Texas birth books, the original ones up to 1976. And what it's used for us is, if I'm working a Texas case in that time frame, and I narrow it down to a specific family and I want to verify those results, I'll go and look up, okay, in 1963, is there an infant of and the surname that I'm looking at? And if there is, then I know that that's the client. And it also has the birth certificate.
So it's a little extra work than doing what I do with the California birth index.
It does have the birth certificate number on it, so I can usually call the client and say, can you read me off the number off your birth certificate? Because it doesn't change when they amend it. So they'll tell me the number, I'll open the book and say, yes, okay, that is you. This is your biological family then. This is your mother's side of the family. And so I'm able to, work that way.
I've never used that. I know there's a database that I use through, it's called vitalsearch-ca.com.
You showed me that one, yeah.
You've used it.
Yep.
They have the California birth index, but it doesn't match.
Right.
It won't have the amended in there.
Oh, yeah.
Now, did I talk about this on my podcast before? I did a search. No, I did it. I think it was on KTLA.
Okay.
By the way, everyone, I still do the segment on KTLA Off the Clock, and my next one is going to be the last Monday in October. I forgot the date. It might be the 29th.
That sounds
And
right.
that episode on Off the Clock was supposed to be, we were going to do episode 21 of my podcast, but we decided just to end season 1, and that was a lady named Tracy Hobson. Tracy is going to be in studio at KTLA. We film next Friday for the Monday after.
Yeah.
And Tracy's story, and I'll just tell you about Tracy's story. Korean-born adoptee.
Wow.
And I've had people on the podcast, Korean-born,
Yeah.
interesting cases. She, I got to get, this was a long time ago this was solved. This is probably before COVID. And we found her birth father, but we weren't sure. It was a hunch. And it could have been 4 brothers. One of the sisters took a DNA test, and we did a live DNA reveal, and it proved that he was the one.
Great work.
Yeah, I want to get this guy on our podcast, but he doesn't want to be here. It's the president of our association.
Oh, okay.
But the sisters didn't want to have their face shown, so we just showed the recording and bring her eyes out. And she'll be live in studio on KTLA next Friday, and we're going to air it a week from Monday.
That's great.
So let me ask you this, and we're rolling right along with this. I mean, it's like these things go really fast. So you've been with me since the end of May 2022. Is that correct?
That sounds right.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's almost 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And I always ask you this: what do you love mostly about working with Birth Parent Finder?
Honestly, how successful we are. I mean, I've, I did search angel work for a little bit when, in my early days of my career before trying to get into the industry. And, there's different ways and different methodologies that people have and of ways when it comes to like contact and things like that and sorting through matches or whatever. And with you, it's like, I mean, you were successful before even me and DNA and genealogy came into the picture. You had the skill set of finding these people, of where to apply to get information, of where to figure this out. And that's what I like about working with you is because, DNA is great, genealogy is great, it's effective. But you bring the skill set of, obviously being a private investigator, but the personal experience too of how to deal with people, how to talk with people, how to get the information you want. So, it's one thing to say, okay, here's your biological parents' names, go call them and see what happens and try to find out what you want. But then have you call them and say, listen, I'm not here to put you on the spot. I'm not here to cause shame to you. I'm not here anything, but can we at least have the medical information? And 9 times out of 10, what happens when you do that?
They give it to us. By the way,
Exactly.
I'm not going to mention any companies specifically, but there's other companies. Search angels in general don't have the skill. In general, I'm saying, and not all of them.
Right.
In general, they don't have the skill set to reach out to the families and get them to talk to them. They don't know them. They can't look up that person in a database and say, or online on Google and say, oh, I know that person. They're legitimate. When they look you up, when they look me up, they know that we're
Right.
legitimate investigator, legitimate genealogist.
Right.
You're on the news. I'm on the news. We're featured on shows.
Right.
It's not like we're scam artists. They know we're not
Right.
scam artists. So,
And we have Rosie to back up that we're not scam artists.
and everyone remember Rosie was on one of our
Yes.
episodes earlier this year, and she is going to be at this conference. She's doing a seminar on using social media to get more business, and looking forward to having her. We would have her here today, but she's driving in from wherever she lives, and she's fighting traffic. So,
Yes.
so, but we'll have her on again. But it's very interesting what she has to say. But we're moving right along. This is great. I mean, I'm looking out now. There's 35 to 40 vendors at this conference. The
Right.
conference actually starts tomorrow.
Okay.
There's a cocktail reception tonight, and it's just this association is over 50 years old.
Yeah.
So it's the largest PI association in the world.
Wow.
California Association of Licensed Investigators. And it's funny because I don't know if you guys can see this. I get these little badges, these tags,
Yep.
ribbons with everything I've done for this association, positions that I've held. And not to brag, but there's 10 of them on here, and according to everyone else, I have the record for the most amount of
That's
these
awesome.
little badges.
Yeah.
I'm a past president, past investigator of the year. I'm an exhibitor at this conference. I've received the Distinguished Achievement Award. I'm a board member. I'm a certified professional investigator, which is like continuing education. They put me down as a speaker, but I'm the moderator of one of the sessions.
Right.
And I'm on the conference committee, and I'm the chairman of the board.
That's great.
So that's, and I'm the CEO and founder of BirthParentFinder.com.
That's right.
There you go.
Yes.
But that's my MO. People make fun of me for keep saying that, but that's catchy though. Again, I'm so looking forward to this conference. I'm so glad you're here.
I am too.
Is there-
Thank you.
We're going to close out in a minute, but is there anything else you want to share with our audience?
Really just how excited I am about, being able to share genealogy with everybody. And I think, for Birth Parent Finder, I'm really excited to see what's going to come over the next couple of months as, maybe we can start inspiring other people in the value of genealogy and what we do and how we can help other investigators too. I think that would be great.
Right, and we recently did an e-blast with Family Tree Magazine.
Yeah.
And an e-blast designated just for us. And you wrote the e-blast in one of your cases. And we shared it with people about one of our successful cases. And it was an unusual case. It involved more than just using DNA.
It was more like traditional genealogy with a little touch of DNA.
And it went out the other day, and we're killing it.
Good. That's good news.
Yeah. Anyway, Misty, thank you. We're spending the whole weekend there. My
Yep.
wife is here.
Yep.
She's a speaker on Saturday. Anyway, again, this is Finding Family DNA, and this is a special episode, and I really hope you enjoyed it with Misty and Jay.
Thanks.
So until next time, we'll see you later.
Bye.
If you are looking to start the journey of finding your family DNA, just go to birthparentfinder.com. Thank you for joining us on Finding Family DNA.
What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars.